This is lesson 5-8A from the Algebra Readiness textbook. Pull out your notes packet and work on this study guide problem on your own. Then compare your video or your answer to mine. D 11ths divided by D 38ths. You learned that you are supposed to multiply by the reciprocal. The first number is D 11ths. I change division to multiplying, and then I flip the fraction. D over 38 becomes 38 over D. Keep it, switch it, flip it is how many of you have learned it also. All right, so I kept the first one, I changed it to subtraction, and then I flipped the second fraction. Now I learned that I can simplify before I multiply. D and D have a common factor of D, and so they equal 1. 11 and 38 do not have any common factors, so I multiply across. 1 times 38 is 38. 11 times 1 is 11. Now, 11 goes into 38. This is improper, isn't it? In your think bubble or on a side piece of paper, 38 divided by 11. You could do it that way. Or you could say, how many groups of 11 can I get out of 38? The answer is 3. That would be 33 units, right? 38 minus 33 gives me 5. 3 and 5/11ths. So today's learning target is to be able to solve one-step equations that involve fractions. 5a equals 1/7. Well, that's definitely an equation you need to solve, and 1/7 is definitely a fraction. We solve equations with fractions the same way we solve equations that don't have fractions. Start by drawing a line down that equal sign. Then look at your variable. My variable is a. A is being multiplied by 5. So what should you do? You need to do the inverse of multiplication. We need to divide both sides by 5. Now, I use the fraction bar here to show division, but on the other side, I'm going to revert back to the old-fashioned division sign. Divide by 5, and I'm going to call 5 over 1, so that both of my numbers are in fraction form. So I've divided both sides by 5. A is all that's remaining on the left. On the right, I have a dividing fraction problem. So I'm going to keep it, switch it, flip it, or multiply by the reciprocal. 1/7 times 1/5. I multiply numerators, 1 times 1, and I multiply denominators. 7 times 5, 1/35. All right, very good. Now I'd like you to pause the video and try these two. They're just like the first one we did together. Then we'll move on to another skill. All right, your first step was to divide or draw a line down the equal sign. Your variable is being multiplied by 8. So we are going to divide both sides by 8. Because 5/7 is a fraction, I'm going to write my 8 in fraction form. I see that I have a dividing fractions problem like we did in the last lesson. 5/8 divided by 8 over 1. I need to keep it, switch it, flip it, or multiply by the reciprocal. If I could reduce anything, any numerator or any denominator, I would have done so, but there's nothing I can simplify. 5 times 1 is 5, 7 times 8 is 56, and that's my answer. Letter C, I'm going to divide both sides by 3. On the right, I write divided by 3 over 1. A is all that's remaining on the left. On the right, I have a dividing fractions problem, 4/5 divided by 3 over 1. So I rewrite it as 4/5 times 1/3. I can't simplify the problem, so I'm going to multiply across. 4 times 1 is 4, and 5 times 3 is 15. A is 4/15. Now, I want you to note that, do you see that I did not try to change this to multiplying by the reciprocal here in this first step? I wrote it divided by 8 or divided by 3. Then I wrote it as multiplying by the reciprocal. Keep those as two separate steps because that is where a lot of errors are and silly mistakes are made. Now, what about if I have a fraction coefficient like this one? Do this problem in your notes along with me. 4/5 times m. Now, everybody is thinking, oh, I know what you do. You should take 4/5 divided by 4/5. And you're right. And you're going to divide this side by 4/5, right? But look what happens when you divide by a fraction. The number you're dividing by is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So instead, you would say 4/5, that's this one. Then you would times by 5/4. So I'm going to show you how to do this a little faster. I'm going to rewrite the problem over here. 4/5 m equals 9/10. You have my permission to just start off knowing that this is 4/5 times m, that you have to multiply by the reciprocal. See how I used parentheses to show multiplying, and then I wrote 5/4, the reciprocal. And you can multiply that on both sides, 5/4. When I simplify this, 5 and 5 have a common factor of 5, 4 and 4 have a common factor of 4, and I'm left with 1m, or just m. That's how I know I did it right, when they all cross off. Then on the right, 5 and 10 have a common factor of 5. I like to simplify first if possible. Then I multiply. 9 times 1 is 9. 2 times 4 is 8. M is really 8 goes into 9 one time, and 1/8 is remaining. Okay? Now, you could have done it this long way, but it gets, like we had over here, but it gets very cumbersome, and this is pretty quick. We're going to do another problem like that together because it's brand new to you. 2/9 times t equals 5/6. Like all problems when I'm solving, I start with my line down the equal sign. T is multiplying by 2/9. The inverse is to divide by 2/9. But I just heard myself thinking out loud that I'm supposed to divide by a fraction. And I learned before that to divide fractions, I multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to do that now. Multiply both sides by 9/2. Then when I check, I see that these all cross out when I simplify the problem. So I know I did it right. T is by itself. Then I reduce this side. 6 and 9 have common factors of 3. 5 times 3 is 15. 2 times 2 is 4. T equals 4 goes into 15 3 times, and 3/4 is remaining. Letter B. Three-fourths S. Oh, let's do this. I would like you to pause the video now and try these two on your own, focusing on multiplying by the reciprocal. To multiply by the reciprocal, I multiply both sides by 4/3. Then I reduce my fractions. S is by itself on the left, and on the right, I'm left with 24. Nope, I'm not. That's 32. Sorry about that, folks. 32/27. Now, 27 goes into 32 one whole time, and 5/27 are left. The next one, or the last one you did by yourself, you multiplied both sides by 4/5. It does not matter that your variable is on the right. Then I multiply the other side by 4/5. These cancel out also, and what am I left with? 1. The value of D is 1, which makes sense. 5/4 times 1 equals 5/4, right? Okay, what if I have a negative coefficient? Uh-oh. Don't fret. You can do it. Draw a line down the equal sign with me, please. I see that K is still being multiplied by a negative 14/25. Some of you try to add 14/25. But what's happening between this fraction and K? That's multiplication. So make sure that you are dividing, which is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So these cross off, and I'm left with K equals. Then on this side, I multiply by negative 25/14. 8 and 14 have a common factor of 2. And 15 and 25 have a common factor of 5. Now I'm ready to multiply across. 4 times a negative 5 is negative 20. 3 times 7 is 21. So my answer is negative 20/21. You do the same thing, you're just multiplying by a negative fraction instead of a positive fraction. Try these, which one do I cross off? Oops. This one. Try A and C on mine, the next two in your notes packet, and then come on back to compare your answers to mine. For this one, you multiplied both sides by negative 7/6. R is remaining on the left-hand side. On the right, 3 and 6 have a common factor of 3. 1 times a negative 7 is negative 7. 4 times 2 is 8. My answer is negative 7/8. All right, n is being multiplied by negative 6. So you need to divide by negative 6. So we're going to divide by negative 6/1. What I have is a division problem. N equals, so what I need to do is 3/7 multiply by the reciprocal. When I'm multiplying by the reciprocal, 3 and 6 have a common factor of 3. Now I'm ready to write down my result. 1 times 1 is 1, and that was actually negative, right? Positive times negative is negative. 7 times 3 is 21. Negative 1/21. Good. All right, this one I want you to put a star by. And the reason I want you to put a star by it is because this one will show up on your quiz. Your teacher needs a shelf to hold a set of textbooks that are 1 5/8 inch wide. So here's my shelf. Here's my shelf. Now, I have textbooks, and I want each textbook to stack neatly on my shelf. And wouldn't you know that each one of these math textbooks are exactly the same width? Now, here's what you need to know. My entire shelf is 26 inches wide, and every one of these textbooks is 1 5/8 inches wide. And I want to know how many textbooks will I fit on one shelf. So really, I want to break that 26 inches up into groups of 1 5/8, because every group of 1 5/8 is one textbook. 1 5/8 times the number of textbooks will be equal to 26 inches. Do you see I have a mixed number? When you have a mixed number, your first step is to convert it to improper. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 plus 5 is 13/8 times t equals 26. Now, multiply both sides by the reciprocal. I'm going to change 26 to 26 over 1 because I'm multiplying by a fraction. 13 and 26 have a common factor of 13. 2 times 8 is 16. 1 times 1 is 1, but we don't call that 16 over 1. We just say 16 textbooks. That means that I should be able to fit 16 textbooks all the way across. Now, here are two more problems that involve a mixed number coefficient. Start by changing them to improper and then solve. Pause the video, complete the task, and then come back to compare your answer to mine. All right, when I converted it, I took 2 times 3 and got 6. Ooh, some of you might need to be reminded of how to do this. Remember, I have 2 times 3 plus the numerator gives me 2 times 3 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7 over 2. Keep the denominator the same. So if you forgot how to do that, it's always the denominator times the whole number plus the numerator. N is remaining on the left when I multiply both sides by the reciprocal. 7 and 28 have a common denominator or have a common factor of 7. 4 times 2 is 8. 1 times 1 is 1, but we call that just 8. Okay, the next one. I need to convert negative 2 and 3/4. So negative 2 and 3/4 equals, I take 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 3 is 11. And I keep the denominator negative 11 fourths. Negative 11 fourths times h equals, now I have to do it again, 12 and 1/2. So 2 times 12 is 24, plus 1 is 25, so negative 25 halves. You're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, but make sure it's negative because we don't want this h to be left with a negative. So h, and then this side is also multiplied by negative 4/11. Notice whatever you multiply by, in this case, negative 4/11, negative 4/11. Over here, I multiplied by 2/7 and 2/7. It's exactly the same fraction on both sides. Now, 2 and 4 have a common factor of 2. 25 times 2 is 50. A negative times a negative is a positive. 50 over 11, because 1 times 11 is 11. Now, this is an improper fraction. 11 goes into 50 4 times, and I get 6/11 remaining. And it's a positive answer. All right, it's time for you to give your homework a try. It's on page 264.